I feel like 2023 going into 2024 has been a great year for new tech, new gadgets, new products. And, every once in a while I like to go through and figure out what's working best for me and why I like them so much. I was going to do a, EDC, what's in my bag video, but instead I just walked around the house, walked around the studio and figured out those things that I use all the time and I absolutely love. And I'm going to share them with you. These are some of my favorite products that I think you would like using, and I bet some of them you've never considered using before. I'm going to start with this thing I'm holding, and I'm going to be holding for the rest of this video. This is the Rode Wireless Pro. So this is the latest, highest end version of the wireless system that Rode makes. And I've owned all the different generations since the beginning of the Rode wireless system. And to be honest, I've never really liked them at all. I've never really used them because I get them in, I try them out, and I'm just not happy with the quality. It feels very, I guess the word is amateur, even though I don't really like that word, but it just doesn't sound that good. I just wasn't happy with them. But Rode sent this over. I've been using it for a few weeks and I'm going to be making a full video on it. And the Rode Wireless Pro, that Pro name, some of the features it has, like the 32-bit recording, some of the accessories it comes with, like the lav kit, it all kind of comes together. And to me, the audio quality with this sounds really good. I'm very happy with it. Of all the wireless systems I've used, I like the way this one sounds the best. So I'm really loving this. I've been recording all my videos with it for the past few weeks. This is definitely on the list. Again, I'm going to be making a full video on it, so stay tuned for that. But in terms of a wireless microphone kit, this is looking like it's taking spot number one, and I really like it. I love my AirPods. I use them every single day for the most part, and they're very functional. I'm not getting rid of them. But there is another pair, the Shokz Open Fit, that I've been using lately, and these are actually very good. I like them a lot. Now, these are what they call open ear technology. So basically it's like a little speaker that pumps audio into your ear instead of having something actually physically in your ear. And the reason I decided to try these is because I didn't exactly have an ear infection, but I just had some irritation in my ear, so I didn't want to put headphones in. Had these, I pulled them out and tried them, and I kind of fell in love with them. And I used them quite a bit, especially when I'm here just around the house and, if my wife's in the same room or something like that. It's nice to be able to listen to something but not have anything blocking my ears. And honestly, that's the main reason I use AirPods Pro, is because I like the transparency feature. I very rarely actually use noise cancellation. I like being able to hear the world around me, and the AirPods Pro kind of were the best version of that transparency mode that you could get. That is until I tried the Shokz Open Fit. Now, granted, they don't sound nearly as good as a full-on pair of headphones that you have in your ears, but they do about 80% of the job. And for me, I'm listening to podcasts and voice most of the time. I'm not listening to a ton of music with these, so it works perfectly for that. But if you want a pair of headphones that just are comfortable, that don't really impede your ears, that you want to use for if you're cycling or if you're at the gym or something, so you want to be aware of your surroundings, I think what Shokz are making, not just the Open Fit, but kind of all their products, I think they've kind of hit a niche that has been needed, and I really like them. Surprisingly so, because this is one of those products you feel like you kind of try and just not use anymore, but I really like these. The latest addition to the arsenal here is Apple Vision Pro. No surprise, I made my full video on this already, which I'll leave linked, so you can go check that out if you want. I have a love-hate relationship with Vision Pro. Hate is a strong word, but this is not exactly the perfect product, as I'm sure if you've seen videos on this, I'm sure you know that, but it's still just so cool and so functional that this is something that I absolutely love using. And there's a few things I love using it for. I've figured out how to slot it into my workflow. For me, the two main ways I use this is for work and for consuming content, mainly things like movies and TV shows. For the media consumption side of it, I'm sure you've all heard how good this is. I think the displays look excellent, especially when you go into an environment. All of that is the best in class. It's like the best you can get right now, and I really love it for that. But on the work side, that's kind of where I was a little bit more surprised with Vision Pro, because I didn't expect it to be as productivity focused, at least for what I use it for, as it is. And I love it for that. I love being able to bring up my virtual Mac screen and work that way. And I love having multiple windows in my space that don't require physical desktops, but I can just have them in virtual space. That is really nice. And surprisingly, one of my favorite things to use it for, which this is definitely something I didn't expect, but it's for taking FaceTime calls and other, video conferencing calls. That is actually one of my favorite things to do with Vision Pro, is take calls and, be on those conference calls with my persona, which doesn't look all that great, but hey, it works. And I just love the way that it sounds. Everything works in spatial, audio, spatial video. I think it actually is quite good. And so I find myself using this quite a bit when I'm here at home as kind of my productivity device. Now, when I'm not at home, or if I'm not using Vision Pro up until, the few weeks that it's been out, when I still want to have that great video quality and I'm using something like my MacBook Pro, that's where today's video sponsor, Opal and the Opal Tadpole, come in, because this is a must-have if you care about what your webcam quality looks like. Tadpole is one of the first, at least the first I can think of, webcam that is specifically designed for your laptop. It's a 1080p webcam that just takes the quality to the next level. And because it's specifically designed for your laptop, it has a few features built in that work really well for that. So it has a built-in cable that isn't too long, but also isn't too short, so you can plug it into the USB-C port. And because it's an integrated cable, there are some cool features that this enables. So at the plug end of it that goes into your computer over USB-C, this is where you can mute or unmute the microphone without having to mess with the camera itself. That's built in right into the plug. And then on the other end, there is a clip built in that lets you just clip it on to the top of your laptop. And in terms of quality, the camera inside, which is giving you a 1080p resolution, looks great. But even equally as important, or even more important in some cases, the noise isolating microphones focus in on your voice so that everyone on the other end can hear you and see you perfectly. So for $129, I think this is a nice way to bump the quality of what you're doing, especially for taking a lot of conference calls, taking a lot of FaceTime calls. This thing really does help. And if you want to pick up one of these for yourself, check out the link down in the description and use the code MATT while checking out, and this will give you 15% off. I think what Opal has been doing is needed for this industry, and the Tadpole is one of the most unique solutions yet. I feel like there's not one of you who would have guessed me talking about this product as one of my favorite products lately, but I use this thing a ton. This is the Bosch Blaze. It's a laser tape measure, so it's all digital. I don't have to run a metal tape, or I still do that a lot, but this thing helps a lot. And, in my house here, we're planning a ton of projects. We're redoing the landscaping. We have a bunch of stuff in this room behind me that we're planning on doing. And while I'm in the planning stages, the design stage of what we want to do, which I'm doing all of my iPad through, 3D design, so I can make up furniture, I can figure out where, like the planter boxes on the outside are going to go. All of that requires relatively precise measurement so that I know what I'm designing is actually, feasible for the space. And that is where the Bosch Blaze comes in. This one in particular goes up to 165 feet. It basically is a laser pointer. Let me see if I can turn it on here. It's a laser. Oh, probably shouldn't point it at the camera, but it's a laser pointer that wherever you point it up to 165 feet, it'll just tell you a readout of the length. So for instance, up to the wall behind me, it's 20 feet. So, just easy to know. It has a memory feature. So if I need multiple measurements, I can log it, then go write them down. This is one of those things that is, turn it off. This is one of those things that is clearly not needed, but for certain spaces that are longer than your typical tape measure, this comes in handy. Now, even though this is great, I still probably wouldn't use it for the most precise measurements, even though it is very precise. I would still run a tape measure for those kind of things, like if I'm making cuts and stuff. But for that, quick run and gun, I have a big space I need to measure really quickly, get square footage, all that kind of stuff. This thing is a must-have, or any of the Bosch laser measuring tapes. This is absolutely a killer device. I love it. Not going back. Okay, now this one, admittedly, I am not entirely sure what the end stage will look like. This is my brand new to me, 7th gen iPod Classic. Now for me, the iPod has a lot of sentimental value. The first real tech product that I ever owned that I actually cared about. Like I had technology stuff before, but the first one that I actually wanted, did research on, and cared about was the iPod Classic. I believe it was the 5th generation. This is the 7th generation, but this thing, I love it. And I've been kind of looking at the idea of using more single-use devices, and this is kind of the starting point for that, the jumping off point. And I don't know, there's just something about using a dedicated device that's made for one thing, in this particular case, listening to audio, listening to music, that is kind of intriguing to me. So I just picked this thing up. It's used, obviously it's kind of banged up and it still works. Battery life is great, and I don't know. We're going to see where this goes. There's a lot of things I want to do with this. I want to mod it. The main one I want to do is, of course, upgrade the storage. I want to upgrade the battery, at least change it out just because this thing is old. But I'd also love to add Bluetooth support so I could just listen a little bit easier. There's things like adding a Taptic engine. I mean, there's just so much you can do with these iPods. You can change the way they look. You can do all kinds of stuff. It's just a fun little project that I'm embarking on with the iPod Classic. I like this thing. Let me know if you still use an iPod or what you would use it for. So far, I just like the way it looks and it's fun to use and listen to. But I think once I get into some of the mods, I'm going to be having a lot of fun with this project. My wristwear of choice, most of the time at least, is the Apple Watch Ultra, and I'm still using the 1st generation because I didn't really see a need to upgrade to the 2nd generation. But when it first came out, I wasn't sure how much I was going to like it because it's pretty big. It's a little bulky. I don't know. I've never worn something that big on my wrist before, but I have grown to absolutely love the Apple Watch Ultra, and I've actually done a good job of using it for a lot more than just checking notifications. When I first got it, I had this goal of doing more things with it than just checking notifications and checking the time, which is what I typically did with my Apple Watch. That kind of felt like a waste of space on my wrist. I wanted to do more with it, especially now that you have a big screen on your wrist available. And I've kind of stuck with that. There's more things that I do with the watch that I would normally pick my phone to do. So for instance, I reply to a lot more messages with the Apple Watch. Sometimes I'm tapping away on the keyboard, but a lot of times I'm just using voice dictation, which I found has been really good lately. Of course, I use it for tracking workouts at the gym. The action button is something I don't really care for. I find that it's more of an annoyance than it is any useful for me. I just like going in and making sure everything I click is exactly the way I want it to be. But it's nice that the feature is there. And I also use it for things like tracking elevation, which for whatever reason I'm always interested in. I'm over 4,500 feet here, but when we go up to the mountains, I like to see how high we are. I don't know, it's kind of dumb, but I like that feature. Getting all my notifications, of course, are still important to me. I love the Apple Watch Ultra, and I use it a ton. Now, that's kind of funny that I just went all through that because on the other side of it, I am starting to not want to wear an Apple Watch, not just the Ultra, but just an Apple Watch in general. I'm starting to not want to do it all that much, or at least for certain activities. There's times where I'm just like, I don't want the Apple Watch. And that's where this thing comes in. This is the Timex Expedition Scout. This is a very simple, cheap watch. And I really honestly got it because I loved the way it looked. It kind of has that like NATO strap look to it. And I love it. It's just a nice way to cover up, honestly, the watch tan that I have on my wrist so that if I don't want to be wearing a smartwatch, I don't know, sometimes you just don't want to. This is a nice replacement to it. Cheap, affordable. I mean, honestly, I don't have any emotional attachment to this watch. I just like the way it looks. I think it's cool and it works for, what I needed it for. I'm kind of starting to enter my watch phase, which I'm kind of scared about because that's a lot of potential money to be spent there. But I've always loved watches. The Apple Watch is what I use most of the time, but kind of getting into those more quote unquote real watches. Timex is a little bit of a baby step, but we'll get there. This right here is one of my favorite products that I purchased last year. This is the Canon R5. The lens is the Sigma 24-70, but I'm not really talking about the lens. Great lens though. But the Canon R5 was something I picked up because I had the Canon R6, and what you're looking at now is the Canon C70. So I'm in that Canon ecosystem, and I was wanting a few things. I wanted a camera that wasn't so crazy as the C70 when it's all built out and it's big. It's more for studio shoots. I wanted something that could be used a little bit more run and gun. But I also wanted something that was very great at taking photos. Before I had this, and I still have it, but the Canon R6 was my kind of run and gun shooter, and for video I absolutely loved it. But for photography, I didn't love it as much. It was still great and it did the job, but the Canon R5 is really made for photos, and it's also great at video, so it was kind of the best of both worlds. Now, the reason it took me so long to actually get this is because I was going to just switch everything over to Sony, which still might happen, but Sony just had a lot more options. So I actually did try the Sony a7R5, which that camera, I absolutely loved it. But after just looking at, the finances of it all, it didn't really make too much sense to sell all my cameras that worked perfectly fine just for the heck of it. So I decided to just pick up the R5, which was a much more affordable option, even though this is still expensive, but it's much cheaper than selling everything I own and, replacing it with other cameras. But I love this camera. I've taken some great photos on it, and so much so that I've had them printed around the house. I mean, this camera is a workhorse for me, great for video, great for photos. In fact, most of the video you see on this channel is shot on this, even though I have the C70. This thing is just so versatile, and I absolutely love it. Full videos on all my cameras coming up because I've never really talked about them, but this thing is still a winner. Even though it's a bit older, I still love it. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is my trusty iPad mini. This has not really changed since I made my video back when it came out. And although there are some things I wish Apple would update with the iPad mini, what I'm using it for, I still absolutely love. I think this form factor is one of my favorites that I've ever used. With the thin bezels, the thin design, it just really fits well in the hand. And for me, the iPad mini is not all that much of an iPad, or I guess the way I treat the iPad mini is different from all the other iPads that Apple makes. To me, this is much more of my digital notebook and digital planner than it is an iPad that I want to, consume content on and, create with. Although I still do that with the iPad mini, this for me is a tool more than it is a toy, and I absolutely love it. This is something I'm also going to be making a full video on again because there's just so much I'd love to say about this, especially now. Is this thing still worth it? For me, spoiler alert, the answer is yes. But the iPad mini, I think, is something I hope Apple continues to update, continues to iterate, because if they, add a few things to this, like a 120 hertz screen, or they add, a slightly faster processor, this thing for me is an instant upgrade because I use it so much. Now, there's a ton of other things that I use on the daily basis that I'll probably get into in another video, like a what's in my bag or a EDC carry. Like, for instance, my iPhone 15 Pro Max, which I've never talked about on this channel for whatever reason, and some of the accessories I use with it. This is a very big part of my everyday carry, and there's other things that I use on the daily basis. But in terms of unique products that maybe you haven't thought of or haven't thought to use, these are my favorites. I use them pretty much every day in some shape or form, and when I use them, they really can't be replaced by anything else.